You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 67. In this episode, I'm going to be interviewing Matthew Betley, who writes the best-selling Logan West Thrillers. Matt grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, was a Marine Corps officer for 10 years, and now writes hard-pounding thrillers that are non-stop action. His latest novel, Field of Valor, was published recently on May 22nd of 2018, and I was lucky enough to get an advance copy, and it was a great read. I enjoyed the book very much. The bullets start flying from first page, and it's pretty much non-stop action from there. So highly recommend you check out Field of Valor. Like I said, it's out now, and we'll be talking with Matt about his process, his writing process, his background, his novels, and a whole lot more. So stay tuned for episode number 67 coming up right now.
Hey everybody, this is Alan Peterson with the Bestseller Author, and for this episode, I'm talking with Matthew Betley. And Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Alan. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. For our listeners who might not be familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. So I am a former Marine officer. I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps. I'm also a recovering alcoholic. Just celebrated 9 years of sobriety. And for the purposes of this conversation, I write a series of action thrillers following Logan West, who is a former Force Recon Marine officer and a relapsing alcoholic. Note the similarities there, and as well as his sidekick, John Quick, as they battle evil forces and conspiracies and a bunch of other exciting things. So that's the down and dirty.
And right now you have this 2 books out on the series, and the third one is going to be published on May 22nd. Is that correct?
That is correct. In fact, Overwatch came out in 2016. I was very fortunate in that it was named one of the top 10 books by the Military Times for 2016. Oath of Honor came out last year in a hardcover, and the paperback of Oath of Honor actually comes out on 24 April in this month, and I found out that it'll be at the front tower of every Barnes & Noble in the country, Hudson News, all the airports, grocery stores. Pocketbooks is the one that does the paperback version of the books, and they've just done a fantastic job. And then, of course, in May, the next hardcover, which is book 3 of the series, Field of Valor, comes out right before Memorial Day on the 22nd.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough that your publisher sent me an advance copy, which is, I appreciate it. It's been awesome. I've been reading it. Really recommend listeners go check that out when it's out. And it's available for pre-sale already, so just FYI for people.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, what most people don't realize is that the first week of any publication is the most important week of that book. So the more pre-orders, the better, especially if people are already fans of the series and planning on picking it up. And I've actually seen other authors talk about that as well. It's just that most people don't think about it like that.
Right, yeah. Oh, I'll wait for it and then forget about it. So if you're thinking about it now, just might as well go get it. You're going to get it anyway and help you out.
Exactly.
So let me ask you something though. Before we get into your books and things like that, before you started the writing, were you a fan of thrillers? And is that why you chose to write these?
It's actually a really deep question, especially for me. So I'm 46. I grew up reading Tom Clancy. I grew up reading Stephen King. I grew up reading Jonathan Irving, who wrote one of my favorite books of all time called A Prayer for O and Me. But I also used to read these action series, Don Pendleton's The Executioner, following a guy named Mac Bolan. There's another series called Able Team Phoenix Force. But then after I was in the Marine Corps, from 1999 on, I discovered an Australian action author named Matthew Riley. And I would say that his pacing is what I try to emulate, but through my own style. I mean, he just writes these nonstop thrillers, and so when I decided what I wanted to write, I basically want to write roller coasters, things that grip the reader from page one and do not stop until the acknowledgments.
You did an incredible job at doing that, because I've been reading Field of Valor, and the bullets start flying like right on the first page.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's really funny. I had a friend of mine who was a Marine colonel, one of my best friends, and he said, "Hey, how come nobody died in your second book until page such and such?" And I was like, well, fine. In that case, I was like, fine, I'll take care of that with the very beginning of the third book.
Yeah, that's good. That's give the readers what they want, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I was looking in your bio. You joined the Marines kind of at a later age, because you said you were in corporate America for a few years before you joined the Marines.
I did. I was. In fact, I graduated in 1994 from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and I spent 5 years in corporate America. In my last job, I was actually investigating accidents with injuries and fatalities for Allstate in Ohio. And then instead of going to law school, I ended up joining the Marine Corps as an officer.
Wow! And how was that experience coming at of an older age? Or I guess for officers, it's different.
Well, so what happens is to be an officer, you have to go through. Obviously, you have to have a 4-year degree. Although there are a couple other programs where if you're an enlisted Marine, you can go through certain programs. But you have to go through 10 weeks of officer candidate school at Quantico, and the whole purpose of that 10 weeks is to weed people out. My class started with, I want to say, 263, and we graduated 173. And in my case, because it's a bit of a mental game, even though it's like physically grueling. It's a very intense 10 weeks. But you understand that when I went in at age 27, I knew it was a game. So part of it's, shut your mouth, try and be invisible, excel on all the physical events, do well. The goal is to blend in, honestly. And so it was a little bit easier. The guys who had the hardest time were the guys right out of college. We had a couple of people take off in the middle of the night, in the provost marshal office, which is the Marine Corps police. They would bring them back, and then obviously they'd be kicked out. But it seemed to be the younger guys, at least in my class, who had the hard time psychologically, at least adapting to that kind of intense lifestyle.
That was one of the great advice that I got when I went to boot camp. Was don't be first in line and don't be last in line.
Exactly. It's very true. And I'll never forget this. It was week 5, and back then, mail was still delivered in letters. I mean, this is 1999, and I remember the sergeant instructor screaming, "Candidate Betley mail!" And I ran up there, and he literally looked at me and was like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "This is awesome." I'm like, "I'm succeeding. I'm halfway through, and guys got no idea who the hell I am."
Once you left the Marines, how long was it before you started writing and thinking, and did you start thinking about, maybe I'm going to write my own books?
Well, so I mentioned that I'm a recovering alcoholic. I got out of the Marine Corps in 2009. And it was sometime must have been August of 2009. I was sober for 6 months. I actually used the military's outpatient rehab program at Andrews Air Force Base for me to finally address my issue. Again, I talk about it so openly because I'm a big believer that if my story just resonates with and helps one person, it's more important than anything else that I could possibly talk about. And I strongly believe that. But I was sober for 6 months, and I was on vacation with my wife, and I was reading this book that had been recommended by Stephen King in, I think, Entertainment Weekly, and I was so bored by the book that I was viscerally angry, and I looked at my wife, and I said, I can write a better book than this. And I obsessed about it for a year, and now I don't have a degree in English, although I'm a grammar guru and a bit of a wordsmith. And I didn't have a master's of fine arts in creative writing. And I obsessed about it for a year, and I finally just sat down and wrote a 5-year plan on the whiteboard and knocked out the first draft of Overwatch. And here we are, 7 years later.
Wow, so that kind of came into place. So this is the first book you put together. You were able to get that published and go through the whole process. That's pretty awesome.
But it was I've learned a lot about how brutal a business is. This is, and what I tell aspiring writers is that you need to take the business side of it as seriously as the creative side. So even before I had an agent, I had developed my own business plan. I had established contacts in media and other places because I knew I would have to be promoting my own material. I had all this organized in a document, so when I would send in my query letters for agencies, I would attach my business plan. And I was happy that Simon & Schuster, when they finally did pick up the series, they did use some of my marketing ideas for marketing Overwatch. But what I would say is that, it took me 18 months, 8 days to write the first draft. It then took another 6 months of editing. Then it was another 6 months of sending out query letters. And I used Jeff Herman's guide to publishers, editors, and agents back in 2012. It was kind of the Bible. I don't know how, if he still updates that guide or that book. I know there are other sites that list all the reputable agencies as well. But back then it was only 92 that handled my kind of commercial fiction. And then I got, rejection after rejection after rejection. And it was number 83 that said, we can't believe you don't have an agent. We want this. And then even after that, it was another 15 months before we got a book deal. So as you can imagine, this is a long, painful process. It's designed to weed people out. It's designed to, I'm convinced that it's designed to crush your hopes and dreams so that you just quit. But I was determined to see it through. And I was very fortunate that in 2014, Emily Bessler Books at Atria, a division of Simon Schuster, said, we want this and you'll be writing for us for a long time. But even then, the first book didn't come out for 2 years just because of the production timeline, even though the book was completely done.
Wow, that's a crazy timeline.
Yeah, it is. So I have learned that you can be determined. You can't force things in this business. Some things just take time. And which is really hard for a very ambitious, impulsive person like I am.
So now your books, you mentioned now with Logan West being in the military and a recovering alcoholic himself, and was that hard to bring some of your? I'm assuming some of your personality is in Logan West. Was that difficult, or? Actually,
no. That's the easiest thing I do. In fact, I tell people now I'm not, a 35-year-old former Force Recon. I'm a 46-year-old former Marine officer who did command a Scout Sniper platoon at one point. However, I didn't run around. I write fiction as realistic and authentic as some of the things that I write about are. I write fiction. So what I will say is that for the people who know the series, my personality is split down the middle between Logan West and John Quick. On a day-to-day basis, I'm John Quick. I'm irreverently sarcastic, self-deprecating. I've had such a serious life that I do not take myself too seriously. Life is way too short for that. And when I get pissed off or I see things going on in the world or I have that mentality of being a tactical Marine, I want to go Logan West on people, which is why I write the way that I do.
We were talking a little bit before I started recording the call that I've been reading your books out of order. So even though they're part of a series, you can pick them up. You don't have to read them in order. Can you tell us a little bit how this whole came together, and if somebody is just starting now, if they haven't read the first one, they'll be able to pick up the third?
Here's the way I describe it. I kind of look at myself as creating an amusement park of thriller rides, and they're all connected. There is a story arc that evolves and develops throughout the series, but the intent was always to keep each one kind of a self-contained story, or even a better analogy is each one's almost like an individual season of a television show. they build upon each other. I mean, it's impossible not to when you're writing a series, because I'm a big believer that my characters should evolve and grow, because that's real life. And I try and make my characters, especially my bad guys, as relatable as possible. Mm-hmm. So you could pick them up. I mean, you can pick them up out of order. Field of Valor, I mean, the way that book starts, you might be a little lost initially until you figure out who everyone is, but that gets resolved within pages because I describe who the characters are, the background, some of the things they've been through, and that book should suck everyone in just right off the bat, anyhow.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the Field of Valor, like the plot, and how the idea came about for writing this one?
Well, so I won't summarize Overwatch of Oath of Honor, but Field of Valor picks up 6 months after the end of Oath of Honor, and Logan West and John Quick are now part of a presidential task force called Ares, and they're trying to figure out who's been behind a series of events that I describe and that they combat in Overwatch and Oath of Honor. And those events are intended to create global instability. So they're trying to find the organization responsible for that, who the traitors are in the U.S. government, overseas, and they're just literally, that's the way that book opens. That's what they're trying to do. And I condensed that book into basically 3 days, and it takes place all over Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, in Maryland near the Chesapeake Bay, and a couple other places. But yeah, so that's it in a nutshell without giving too much away. I will say it's in my opinion the fastest rocket ride that I've written, just because of what I wanted to create with that book.
And I'm most curious about the writing process when I'm talking to writers. Do you outline these extensively, or do you just kind of sit down and start writing, or what's your style?
So I know what I'm going to write. I actually don't even feel like an author, and I say this all the time. And there are some authors who get it, and that is, I feel like I'm more of a scribe. I know where the story's going. I know how things are going to play out. I didn't outline Overwatch or Oath of Honor. I think Oath of Honor, I had a list of 5 things on a small piece of paper. Overwatch, I think I had like 1 page of things because I had crossed out some other things. Field of Valor, I think I had exactly. It was like maybe 5 or 6 things that I wanted to do. But the way it works for me is I sit down on my laptop, I turn on musical scores to movies because that's what I listen to while I'm writing. And I feel like I'm more of a scribe, just putting down on virtual paper what I'm seeing, hearing, and feeling in my head. And that's it. All of a sudden, like an hour or 2 are gone, and I've got several pages of new material.
Yeah, I noticed that music plays an important part in your stories. Like the book opens with bullets flying and Stone Temple Pilots rocking in the background. So music is important to you for your writing process.
It is. I'm a big believer that music helps trigger that creative mental state. At least it does for me. And I listen to great modern day composers like Hans Zimmer, Stephen Jablonski, Brian Tyler, Lauren Balfe, and a bunch of others.
And do you usually write in the same spot? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I have an office. I have an office in my house that I use.
Okay. And then do you usually do you try to say when you're writing in the middle of the writing, I'm gonna write X amount of words per day, or are you just gonna play it by ear? I play it by ear. I just I have a very busy lifestyle. I've got a family, and so I write when I can. Mm-hmm. And so, what about in your family and friends? Do they ever find their way into your books? There are people that I know I've named a couple characters after. Cool. Mainly because they just asked. I was like, sure, why not? I believe that this should be fun for everyone. It should be fun for the readers. It should be fun for me. There is a radio show host who's got this huge talk show host on AM radio in Detroit named Frank Beckman,
And so he was harassing me when Overwatch came out. He's like, hey, come on, why don't you name a character after me? So I did for Field. By then, though, Oath of Honor had already been finished, and so I did it for Field of Valor.
Yeah, that's cool. I was going to say, okay, yeah, he's in Field of Valor.
Yeah, he is. He is.
Yeah, that's the real name.
It is. That is a real name, and I know he was thrilled because he got an advance copy as well when he saw that.
Do you tell him?
And that's a great sequence. Yeah, that's a great sequence. By the way.
His intro. Yeah, I don't want to get too much away here, but yeah, when they're driving on the freeway in Maryland,
yep.
And it's a lot of stuff happens.
Yep.
Yeah, and so Field of Valor comes out on May 22nd. I know you're busy right now with the book coming out and doing a lot of marketing and promotion. When do you start thinking about the next book? And is it going to be another?
Yeah, I'm already writing it right now. I've already got, I think, 85 pages for 2019 Logan West entry. But then I also have ideas already for books 5 and 6 planned out in my head. And I get a lot of feedback from readers who really want to see a standalone for Amira Cerrone. People just absolutely love that character and respond to her. And I have a fantastic, what I think is good, at least, origin story planned out in my head for how she would be the main focus of a novel and how her story would unfold. But, of course, at some point, Logan and friends would have to come to her aid as well.
Yeah, that's cool. So two different series, but in the same universe. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, that's my plan. We'll see how it all plays out. It's all up to the readers. The market decides the future. That's the reality.
And do you interact a lot with your readers on social media and all of that?
I do. Readers can follow me at Matthew Betley on Twitter. There's a Facebook fan page. I do have a website. I don't have the time to put out a newsletter right now, but I know people have been signing up. I tell people the easiest thing is honestly Twitter. For me, it's just the easiest place where I can just fire off an update real quick on what's going on. But I know some people prefer Facebook, so I update that as well, especially when it comes to book material.
Mm-hmm. And are you going to be doing like any book tours or anything like that?
Totally. Yep. We'll. I don't have specific dates yet, or at least not in front of me. But I know that we started at Barnes & Noble in Annapolis, always on the opening day, because I'm always on the radio in Annapolis that morning. And then I've got an event that night and a couple events like the following week. And then I'll also be going down and doing events at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which is my old stomping grounds. And then also Fort Bragg for this book. And then I go up to a place in Westerly, Rhode Island, which just puts on fantastic events. So it's, I'm all over the place. And then I'll be doing lots and lots and lots of radio interviews as well.
Yeah, and I'll have a link on the website but if they go to your website, probably can get information there too. It's on MatthewBetley.com, just so the listeners know.
Yep.
How much research do you put into these books? Because they're very thorough with weaponry and do you do a lot of research?
I do. It's really funny. I research to the extent where if I don't know something already, because I do have a lot of experience with various weapons, especially from my time in the Marine Corps. But I do the research that I need, and then I put it down. I want my books, I'm a big believer in pace over technical detail, but I've also had people say, well, you actually have a lot of technical detail in your books. But I don't want, I want to tell you what time it is. I don't want to build you a clock. Seriously, that's how I look at it. I just keep it that simple. So I have kind of a threshold, especially if I'm describing geopolitical events. I'll do a lot of research and a lot of reading. For example, right now I can tell you that before we're in Venezuela in South America, and I have done so much research on their crisis down there that it makes my head want to explode. But then you only get like a few paragraphs on it in the book because I don't need to, do it in such an analytical detail that it bores the reader to death.
Yeah, that's great. That really makes it nice page turners because, you know, I mean, I love Tom Clancy like anyone else, but sometimes, you know, you find yourself skipping when they get to a little too much of especially the older books.
No.
but anyway, yeah, no, that's awesome. And do you still, you must be too busy now, but do you still find time to read thrillers?
I do not right now. Right now,
Yeah.
in fact, I'm reading a book by a fellow Emily Bestler author named Ezekiel Boone, who wrote this horror series about spiders that hatch all over the world and basically bring on an apocalypse. And it's a wildly entertaining, think 1960s black and white B monster movie, and it's awesomely fun. And that I'm reading right now, but I started reading it in the fall. And I still haven't finished it, so that's how busy I am. You know, and now that we're about to sign the movie deal, things are picking up even further. So,
yeah, I'm sure you can't say much about that, but that's exciting news. So,
if you think publishing is hard, we were represented by Creative Artists Agency, CAA, since August of 2015. And we just now reached a deal with Thunder Road Pictures to make a worldwide franchise based on the books. And we've named Braden Aftergood as the producer. This was all announced in Variety about a month ago in Hollywood. And there's an article out there about it. And, you know, Braden Aftergood is just this fantastic producer who made Lone Survivor, worked on Sicario. He did Hell or High Water, Wind River, and Thunder Road is the production company that put out the John Wick movies, did Sicario, The Town. Basically, they acquire material and property that they want to make. So we're already, I know that the producer and the screenwriter are already working on adapting the screenplay for the first book. You know, we'll see where it goes. You know, the goal is to always get the movie made. If you end up with like a huge studio, sometimes you can fall into what they call development hell, where the book can just languish away for years. But with a company like Thunder Road, you know, like I said, they acquire property they intend to make.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome resume too. I love it. Most of those movies I've seen them; they're awesome. The Sicario,
and that's the goal. You read Oath of Honor and reading Feel of Valor. The goal is to make a movie that feels like a combination of John Wick, Lone Survivor, and Sicario.
Yeah,
especially if you were to read Overwatch.
Yeah, I got to go back to read the first one. I'm going backwards.
It's okay.
Yeah, but even reading the Feel of Valor, like I was like, man, I could totally see that, like The Town, you know, those like big shootout scenes and everything. That'd be pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, man, I'm not going to take much more of your time here. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast and doing this interview. Anything else you want to tell the listeners before I let you go?
No, I'm just, like I said, I appreciate you taking the time. Like, for me, the most important thing is the experience that each reader has with each of my stories. You know, I'm just fortunate that I'm in this position and that more readers are picking up and discovering the series, because the more people that do, then the more books that I can write and the more stories that I can tell. But again, you know, how people respond to it is what really matters to me, because at the end of the day, it's all about the readers and it's not about me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author. I'd like to ask you to please review and rate this podcast over on iTunes. It really helps me get the word out. If you take a few seconds of your time to do that, it would be much appreciated. You can also visit my website at thrillingreads.com/podcast for show notes on this episode, as well as information about the podcast in general. And you can also sign up for my mailing list there. You'll be getting special offers from our guests, as well as information, behind the scenes information on the podcast. And please do visit my author website at alanpeterson.com. I appreciate your support. And so until next episode, I will talk to you then.